Okay,
I
so
like
so
I like your slide design. It's really,
thank you.
really
So,
colorful.
so so you can see the first one, understanding the contribution of the circular economy. So just can I just get a quick show of hands? How many of you actually know what the circular economy is, or feel so confident that you could give us a definition of the circular economy?
I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, one at the back.
Or if somebody's online, maybe feel free to pop it into chat as well.
You want to come a bit closer, Ruben? I'm going to ask Ruben to come down so that
Good for you for having thanks for having the courage to step up and.
yeah, I think they can be seen from there, but your head actually your head's out of the camera.
There we go. Okay. Hi. Hi.
So, I mean, I think it's just generally the idea of having the production and the use of the things being produced keeping within a cycle. So, and like in general, so for example, something like clothing would be created usually with a mind to having it last a lot longer than modern fast fashion. But then as it deteriorates, or as it becomes out of use for one person, it's then, you know, sold on or given on to another person. And then as it deteriorates in quality, it's repaired. And as it goes further to no longer being usable, it becomes scrap material for other purposes. And then so everything, it's basically like keeping a sustainability that doesn't require a constant influx of new materials and new production, and doesn't have an output of excessive and unsustainable waste. That's basically my overall understanding of the idea.
Really nicely explained. Thank you. That was great. It's Ruben, right? Thank you. That was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and as Ruben said, I mean, so it's, you know, what we're really, the sustainability side is that we're trying to avoid this drawdown of resources on one end, and trying to avoid, you know, some of the pollutants that are involved in, you know, poor waste practices at the other end, right? But here's the question for you. Why would companies want to do that? You know, like, you know, companies aren't evil. They don't wake up in the morning and say, you know, we're going to damage the planet today. But what happens is they go through the process of trying to think to themselves, how do we compete in a world where prices, you know, are, you know, increasingly being pushed down by competition, right? So how do we beat out the competitor in our global markets? Because if they can't do that, these people lose their jobs. And so this is actually, folks, I think the root of the sustainability challenge is that we ask people to be more sustainable, but in the pursuit of their daily activities or their daily lives, we actually have these bizarre misplaced incentives that are encouraging people not to be sustainable. So when it comes to businesses, the whole idea is, well, you know, we want businesses to be sustainable. So, you know, do your part. But businesses have to grow in order to compete well. They have to, you know, improve their financial performance. And by doing so, they actually wind up being a little bit less sustainable. So this was the challenge that really got me interested about 20 years ago in the circular economy. Back then, we weren't even calling it the circular economy. We were calling it, you know, industrial ecology or industrial symbiosis, or, you know, a whole bunch of different names. But the principle was the same, which is there a way that businesses can play a role in being more sustainable without putting in jeopardy their ability to compete? So that to me is what the circular economy is all about. So I'm going to extend a little bit the definition that Ruben gave, because the definition is essentially right in that, you know, the circular economy is about cycling through resources and keeping, you know, virgin resources in their original habitats and making sure that we get out of, excessive waste practices. But it's more than that. There's one other aspect of it, and it's this one here. Let me just make sure that I'll put up my screen here. Okay, can you see a hierarchy here?
Yep.
Okay, so this to me in one slide defines what the circular economy is. This describes what we are trying to do. And the three words on the left here explain exactly what the strategy is. So the strategy is to increase resource productivity or to optimize resource productivity. So think about that for a minute, right? In order to optimize your resources, so to suck out every ounce of value from every resource you use, you are then creating an economy where the companies are more profitable because they are doing things more efficiently. But at the same time, if we just changed. If at the same time, if we manage to get companies improving the way they use resources, we also use less resources, right? For generating the same amount of economic activity. And so that's what we're trying to do with the circular economy. That's all this is saying. So at the top, we have reduce. And so reduce is actually just an acknowledgement that the best way to make the best use of your resources is just simply not to use them, or at least try to reduce them a bit, right? So if I can create 100 notebook computers using 10 tons of plastic instead of 20 tons of plastic, it means that I don't need to use 10 tons of plastic. And so by doing so, I've actually saved myself the money that I would normally have to spend on this plastic. But I've also reduced the amount of plastic that gets put into the economy. So do you see the double benefits there? Now, similarly with reuse and repair, the reason these two are more preferable than anything else is because in order to reuse something, all you need to do is somehow get it back, clean it up, send it back out again. So if we want to resell a chair, we get the chair back, we fix, or we maybe rinse off the chair, wash it, clean it up, and then we try to sell it in a secondhand shop or something. So that whole idea of reuse can be very beneficial to a company's bottom line. So imagine, for example, to send around when you deliver your products at a company, you usually have to put them on a wooden pallet, right? And these wooden pallets then get moved around by trucks and forklifts everywhere. Well, imagine if that wooden pallet, it goes onto a truck, and then your product goes bye-bye, and you wave goodbye to it, and then it goes off somewhere to customers. But if we can get that pallet back again, and if we can use that pallet again, the company doesn't need to buy a new one. And so as a result of that, this whole idea of reuse, it manages to save money. And at the same time, it uses less resources. So now these two things, saving money for companies or making money for companies and saving resources, is really at the heart of the circular economy. Without the profit motive for companies, they just simply will not do it. And that's why down here, recycling is one of the last things that you find in a circular economy. Because imagine if you want to recycle your computer, right? Your computer gets sent to what we call a disaggregator. The disaggregator breaks it apart, and then they send it, they put plastics in one area, they put metals in another, rubber in another, chipboards in another, et cetera, And then these things get sent off to recyclers who then recycle. Then they send it to another company who takes the recycled material, turns it into another product. The product then gets aggregated back into, or the goods get aggregated back to another product, and then it gets sent to the store. So that whole cycle, breaking it down, refabricating it, putting it into new products, shipping it back to the store. It requires energy, labor, cost, assets, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why recycling is not the ideal thing in a circular economy. We want people to reduce and reuse and repair first. And then if we can't do that, at the end of the day, we then recycle. So that is really the whole, insight. Now you are experts in the circular economy. I'll stop there for a minute, just in case there are any questions.
Anyone got a question? No, doesn't seem to be any questions right now.
You see what I did there? And I enabled myself to also to drink tea from the largest teacup you are ever going to see.
Well done.
All right. Which by the way was purchased in Arita-cho in Kyushu. Arita Yaki, very famous water.
It's
Okay.
very big.
Okay, so the circular economy, once you understand that, then you understand all of these butterflies that you often see when we talk about the circular economy. Because basically what's happening is all of these companies are first of all trying to eliminate and reduce the amount of resources they use, right? And then with the hierarchy, they're attempting to do all of the things near the top of the hierarchy first. And so you've got reuse, repair, remanufacture. And what these little loops are saying is they're basically saying, a company might want to reuse something by simply trying to get it back from its own customers, or repair something by getting it back from its own customers. So for example, Apple, the most profitable segment of Apple's business are the refurbished iPhones and iPads. Because when you think about it, the customer actually brings in their iPhones, right? To trade up, right? They get a very small amount of money for it, maybe, 5,000 yen or something, and even less in cases. And then they get to just simply repair it, change the screen, change some of the plastic, and then send it back out again for about 70% of the price of a normal Apple. So that's why, companies, try to pursue these types of strategies. But they also try, to work with consumers. So here's consumers on the right. They're trying to do the same thing because, if I reuse something, I don't have to buy it again. So I save money. If I repair something, I don't have to buy it again. So I save money. So consumers are trying to do the same thing. But what we also are doing, we're trying to tap into the consumers and say, look, if you don't need our product anymore, how about sending it back to us? And so a good example of that is Xerox with their ink cartridges. Xerox, when they sell an ink cartridge to somebody, for your printer, not the home printers, but for the bigger printers, they actually they give you an envelope as well. So then you just put the old ink cartridge back in the envelope and send it back to Xerox, and then they refill and reuse it again. Why? Because it's more profitable to do so. So that's what we've got going on in the circular economy. Now, when we do that, it leads to all of these other benefits that are attributed to SDGs. You see, because if we can have a company that is using resources better, they make more money. And if they make more money, they can hire more people. So if they can hire more people, they can hire more people doing quality work. So this is, the SDG, 1 and 2, the poverty and what is it? Poverty and what's the second one? Food, right? It also fits into SDG 8 and 9, which are about economic growth and development. The building of stronger communities fits into SDG, 10 for the livable cities? I think Brendan, you would know better than I.
It's 11.
11. It fits into lower management costs, lower resource footprints, lower carbon footprints. So, the SDGs that are related to water and to energy all fit into this. And of course, the big one is SDG 12, which is sustainable production and consumption. So this is why, it's interesting when I talk to governments about this. My point is always, and I've just had this discussion here in Brunei. Brunei doesn't need to adopt a climate change strategy. All it needs to do is adopt a strategy to use its resources better. Because if it does that, it can reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 60 to 80% just by being more efficient. And so, then the rest of it we can deal with down the road. But the initial benefits should be had to the benefit of the nation as well. So this fits in really nicely with climate change strategies. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a couple stories now, and these two stories will be little cases that we'll build off of. So the idea is I'm going to tell you a story, and then at the end of the story, I'm going to put you to work in groups to see if you can't add on to the story. But essentially what these two case studies are doing is they're showing you real life examples of how the circular economy can lead to a much better, much more sustainable planet. Okay, the first one is this, and if you need to stop or anything, just put a hand up or something, and Brendan, you can stop me. I'm really happy to stop and field any questions or comments as we go along. Okay, so yeah.
No, it seems fine. There's no questions right now.
Okay, so this school in front that you're seeing on this slide is in Suva, Fiji, and it's called the Montfort School for Wayward Boys. Now, the school is a school that is being designed to help at-risk youth. So these kids basically, they come from broken families, impoverished conditions. And so really what the school is trying to do is they're trying to teach some vocational skills in addition to the standard academic skills that you would get in a high school. Now, down the road from this, you've got this. Now, in Japanese, I guess they would call this kami-sama no ureshi namida kara tsukurareta mo. So the tears, someone want to try to, other than Brendan, anyone want to have a go at that one? Kami-sama no ureshi namida kara tsukurareta mono. Someone want to have a go at?
Anybody? There are happy tears of God. Did you say something like that?
That's right.
Something that is not the happy tears of God.
That's right. The tears of joy from the gods. Otherwise known as Asahi beer. So we've got an Asahi beer factory right down the road from the Montfort School for Wayward Boys. And so the question is this: how do we search for connections to put these together in a symbiotic way? And of course, at this stage, if it's a younger class, everybody starts laughing and they say, oh, well, of course, the students can come and work there and you can sell the beer to the students. Well, really, is that the only thing that we as an enlightened society can manage to find in terms of connections with these two organizations? So this guy named George Chan, who's at the UN University in Shibuya. I don't know if he's still there or not. Do you know George, by the way, Brendan?
Yeah, but unfortunately he's passed away.
Oh, has he? Oh dear. Okay. There you go. So his legacy lives on a bit here. So George actually came up with this plan. He observed that as part of the brewing process, you get this yeast byproduct, right? That sort of that white foamy goo that you might see if you've ever brewed beer at home. And so that brewery waste is really high in yeast. So he simply asked himself, well, what type of agricultural product likes yeast? And his answer was mushrooms. So he created this mushroom farm. So he basically went into Asahi and said, can we have your yeast, byproduct? And Asahi said, absolutely, because we're having to pay to get rid of it. So if you take it for free, that's wonderful. Okay, so they take this free resource and they put it on this mushroom farm, and you get these wonderful mushrooms. Now, there's 3 outputs associated with the mushroom farm, right? One of them, of course, are mushrooms. The other one are broken mushrooms. So he asked himself, okay, we've got these broken mushrooms. What can we do with them? And his solution was, well, we'll start a pig farm and we'll feed them to the pigs. So now you've got also this nutrient-rich water that's gone through the farm, right? And he asked himself, what can we do with that water? And he thought, well, let's put them into an algae pond because then we can grow algae using the yeast, right? I'll get back to that in a minute. Now, the pig farm, of course, he looked at the pig farm and he looked at the pigs and he said, well, what outputs can I see here? Now, one of the outputs, of course, are the pigs. And so he sent the pigs to the proverbial market. And the stuff that comes out the back end of pigs, the manure, he thought, well, let's make use of that. We will put it in an anaerobic digester. And so an anaerobic digester in a place like that is basically an oil barrel that you take the top off and you put the manure in and you seal the top, you put a hose in the top, and then you turn it on its side and you heat it and turn it. And so what happens is the manure starts to break down. And in the absence, because there's no oxygen inside, it starts to create methane. And so the methane can then be captured. And so the methane can go off to a generator to power electricity for the school. Now, after you've finished collecting the methane, you of course now have the dried manure. So he funneled that into a rich fertilizer, and any sort of liquid remnants he can put into another algae pond because now he's got algae to help to purify this. So he might have a secondary algae holding pond to collect this type of material. Now the algae pond he looked at and he said, okay, what are the outputs there? And so, with algae, of course, the main output is algae, right? So he thought, well, if we take the algae and mix it in with fertilizer, now we've got, a nice, sort of combination fertilizer because, algae will be, rich in nitrogen, it'll be rich in iodine, whereas, with the pig farming, you might have something that's richer in, potassium and nitrogen, for example. But the algae ponds also had this nice purified water. And so the purified water he funneled down into a fish pond. And he thought, okay, what can I do with the fish pond and what are the outputs? So he put the fish in and said to himself, well, why don't we also we'll also raise some shrimp because shrimp live off of the feces and the other remnants of fish partially. And so as a result, they're a symbiotic combination. So now he's got two different products that he then takes and sends off to market. The bits of the fish and the shrimp that cannot be sold go back to a fish farm. And the water that now has all of this rich nutrients from the fish goes to a vegetable farm. And of course, the vegetable farm takes the fertilizer and grows these wonderful vegetables that go to market, and all of the broken vegetables go off to the pig farm. So isn't that interesting, right? We had a story where we were looking at a beer factory and asking ourselves, how can we take that one product from a beer factory and turn it into something special? The important thing, folks, is to remember, look, when you look at this, think about what we were trying to do with this school, right? So we're not just trying to create a sexy little diagram that's kind of neat. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to educate kids on vocational skills, aren't we? So, what have we done here? We've taught people how to about organic farming. We taught them about raising animals. We taught them about aquaculture and aquatics. We taught them about basic anaerobic digestion. They've learned a little bit about technology because they've got a generator that's involved in this process. And they've learned a lot about marketing because at the end of the day, everything is going off to market. These skills have all now been imparted thanks to this small little project that looks like this. So that to me is a circular economy. And, we talked earlier about what is a regenerative economy. Brendan and I were talking about that. Well, to me, the idea of a regenerative economy is using circular economy principles like this. We ask ourselves, how can we be clever and recycle our materials in a way that actually benefits an organization? right? So if it's okay, let me put you to work. I'd like to just break you into groups and just have a 10-minute discussion, then we'll get back together with sharing. And keep in mind the goal of the Montfort School. We're trying to nurture these young students, right? But see if you can identify at least 3 additional tasks that can be deployed that you think can be connected to this process and enhance both the experience and the benefits that are derived from this. Okay, so I'll go back here and I'll put this back on, but just the task is identify at least 3 additional tasks. Okay, any questions?
I'm just assigning the online students to a break room
Great.
so they can join. Does anybody got any questions? Okay, so you're happy to kind of group up and then have a chat?
We'll go around the circle, do one each.
Okay, so would somebody from each group volunteer to come and just feedback
Choose your best one.
on what you've been discussing? Yeah, please, could you come up so that Scott can see you? I'm gonna put the chair here if you want to sit there on it. Because Ruben was too tall, we couldn't actually see his face. Please, can you sit down? Yeah. Okay, so here's our first.
Yeah.
It's like an interview.
It's like a job interview.
But it's funny because I can't see very well because of the size of the screen, and I keep wanting to put my glasses on, and then I realize it doesn't matter. So
Is it I mean, I'm not sure. Can you can you see the?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm gonna sit like this.
all right.
Just now when Ruben was presenting, we couldn't hear much.
Right. Make the microphone a bit closer.
Just one, right? Okay. The one that we thought of was to provide the boys with entrepreneurship experience. So you mentioned about how the crops as well as other products from the farms are being shipped off to the market. So we're thinking of, instead of shipping off to the market, we're thinking of like either starting a farmers market within their community, or they could do like a cafe using their own produce, or they could set up their own online shop. So they can gain this kind of like entrepreneurship experience on top of all this farming, just to complete the cycle, instead of just shipping it off or exporting it off somewhere else. Yeah, it's just.
I love the idea of an online shop because immediately, those are skills that these students could definitely benefit from. Where would you get the computers from?
I don't know. We didn't think that far.
But because that's the thing is that, each of these ideas, so we're trying to benefit the school. Now we've got a great idea. Now, if we start the process of saying, okay, now how do we do this in a way that takes advantages of resources that are already in the community rather than resources that, that we have to purchase anew. So for example, is there somewhere where we can get a donation from a computer or two?
I mean, you mentioned that Apple, they refurbish their own, pre-loved products and sell them off at 70%. So they could get that, or either through donations, and the power that can be used to charge those computers can be generated by running the purified water from the algae pond through like a dam or something like that. But they don't need multiple computers, they just need one, assuming that it doesn't break down.
So do you see where we go with this as we start to talk more about the circular economy? Because, this discussion started with us saying, well, let's get them an online presence so that we can teach them the computing skills that are necessary. And then we started to ask ourselves, okay, where do we get the computer from? And you start to think about where in the community do you get these refurbished computers from? So now we're talking about refurbished computers. Now that's got me thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if we had a class in how to repair computers?
I don't know, because, um. To have a class to repair refurbished computers, you would require to like ship like computers, actual computers to the place to the class for them to learn how to do it. And because schools always have new students, I assume that like they can't be like breaking the computers down or getting more computers in, and I don't think that's very sustainable, assuming like logistics and transportation costs and things like that.
Okay. I think what I often say to, when we do this in a business setting is, those types of barriers that you've raised are always useful, because when you raise these types of barriers, it indicates some true potential problems that we might have with this. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It just means that if we can't come up with a way to overcome the barriers, then we must reconsider if we do this again. But, I'll give you I won't spend too much time on this because I know we're kind of short for time, but I'll give you a company to research. There's a company called Enable Australia. So ENABLE. Or actually it's Enable and then IT Australia. And basically they're a company that takes broken computers and fixes the ones that they can fix and recycles the ones that they recycle. But they do it with people that are having a hard time finding work. So they're a social venture in addition to a business. And this actually business in Melbourne has made a ton of money for the social venture, but it's also, garnered lots of headlines for its impact that it's had. So, again, I would argue a school that is running, if you're teaching in a modern society, if you're teaching young people something, it needs to have computers in it. And so why not find a way that we can fit this in, right?
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Great,
thank you.
excellent.
Thanks.
Yeah, especially e-waste is such a big problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, next group gonna come up.
And then, once you've got the computers, being fixed, I mean, then it's just a matter of, oh, well, okay, now that we've got computers, we can have computer courses, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, group 2.
Hi.
We talked about what the brewery waste can be converted into, and we thought about how there could be possibly probiotics, minerals, and vitamins that could be used to make like supplements. So maybe a factory, I'm assuming they already have some type of factory facility, and then they can use that towards producing like medical supplements.
Okay, so, I don't think they do have that factory, but what you've just said, I think, is a super interesting idea, because what you're really teaching them there is how to look at a product and search for ways to up value them. So rather than just dumping it on a mushroom field, is there some way that we can take these nutrients and extract even more value from them? And, the idea of being able to do that, further down the line with some of the vegetables or some of the other products. So instead of just selling carrots to a market, is there a way to use those carrots, those potatoes, those peas in a different way?
Great, okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Super good idea, though. So there we have it. So now what we've got is we've got the foundations for a culinary course, right? Is that not a skill that young people might want to have? So we could actually have a cooking school that's using the vegetables from this.
There you go, cooking school. Last group. here in the classroom, and then next maybe the online group as well. Right, okay. Ruben's on his way up. Sit down, otherwise we can't see you.
Yeah, that's fine.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I mean, almost everything in the process has potential for some kind of educational system. You learn about biology and chemistry through any of the, you know, I forgot the word, composting, like, and the fertilization, the brewing, like the actually standard things, standard parts of like the curriculum in school anyway. You know, you learn about like fermentation stuff, anaerobic and aerobic processes, and then again, yeah, cooking classes, and you can also have like business classes based around the market. You can have creative aspects based around like advertising processes and things like that related to all of the different parts of it. And you can have working on the farms directly as a work study. But you can also then, a lot of the time, troubled youth has links to unstable home lives, which is often the case for, you know, income security issues. So any of these extra business models and things creates jobs, which means that the parents can also potentially have better access to work. And you can also have any kinds of apprenticeships that are leading into, when it's more appropriate, the kids working and having better prospects for their future of work without having the sort of job security issues to the same degree that they might have before. So that's more or less the stuff that we were discussing.
Love that thinking, because you know this is a different perspective than the other groups. So the other two groups, you know, started, you know, introducing new avenues that could, you know, lead to, you know, new offerings for the students. And then the third group has supplemented that by saying, you know, wait a minute, you know, can we also, you know, be sure that when we are doing this activity that we, you know, extract all of the value from it by making sure that we are clearly attaching these activities back to formal classroom courses so that students learn firsthand, you know, or what they're learning in their textbooks are reinforced firsthand by that experience. So, you know, actually the third group, that what you're, I think, kind of suggesting there is the creation of an education system that is far better than even some of the more expensive private schools, because they're actually getting people hands-on experience in understanding how what they're reading in textbooks can actually be applied in real life. Great, good stuff.
Absolutely. How about online? Would anybody from the online group like to give some feedback on what you were discussing?
Yes, I can
Oh,
do
great.
that.
Okay, thank you.
So you talked about it. We talked about the cooking skill. So in order to develop that, we either want to propose to get the products from leftovers from the community, or have a community garden. So they will also work on cooking skills and gardening skills, and they might also have better communicational skills with the local community when they get the products. So yeah, that's what we talk about.
Interesting. Right, so another dimension, super interesting dimension there, because you know we didn't talk about this, but the whole idea of imagine circularity beyond the borders of the school itself. You know, so now we've got the idea of a community garden where people can come and they can, you know, create, you know, other, you know, plants, they can cultivate other types of crops. And in doing so, they can actually transfer some of that knowledge to the students. But the students can also transfer knowledge to people who want to be involved in the community garden. So it's a two-way street. Best way to learn is to teach, right? So, to extend that a little bit further, how about having classes for, elementary school kids? Where they mentor them in the practices. They give people tours and explain the technology, etc. Really excellent. Thanks for that contribution.
Thank you.
Brilliant. I think that's all groups reported back.
All right. All right, good stuff. Let me go back to our sharing here. So, thanks everyone. This is really hard to do when we're doing this online, so it really kind of cuts into our time. I'm sorry, because I really think that the point that is being made through the exercises that, all done here is the power of diversity, and the power of community involvement. So when we talk about sustainability from a broader perspective, even, one of the biggest problems in the world when it comes to sustainability is that the solutions often wind up being talked about at high levels without sufficient integration to the people that are actually implementing this, the people on the ground. And as a result of that, they miss out on some golden opportunities to really, truly define some, some solutions. And, look at this. Where are we here? This was kind of a nice model, I think, when I presented it. And then now we've got, the possibility of, hey, can we have like a computer repair or some sort of workshop there? Can we have, culinary school? Can we have, community gardens, bringing people in from outside? The more that we talk, just the greater this entire project becomes, doesn't it?
I think what's interesting is how for many of us, though, we've moved quite far away from these models that were probably fairly normal at one point in time. And now it seems sort of unique to be able to connect up all these different aspects. Whereas I think, if you look at a traditional village, everything was interconnected anyway.
Yeah.
And we're kind of having to rediscover how to do this, which is a bit strange, isn't it?
Yeah, that is so true. And a lot of this comes down to Adam Smith, and the famous economist from 200 years ago, and his thoughts on specialization, and it started off an economic perspective on development, whereby, they believe that by focusing on, one product, creating one product well, you achieve these high economies of scale. And these high economies of scale drive the price or the cost of that product down and allows you to compete best. And so that's why businesses around the world, have embraced that same principle. Let's simplify, create a limited amount of products, but do it better than anybody else does. Now, the problem, of course, with that is that we don't realize that by for example, trying to produce everything cheaper, you wind up missing out on all of the other opportunities that you would normally find if you were trying to do something just, with the highest impact, not just economic impact, but overall sustainable impact that you would find in these kind of networks, right?
Yep.
So let me show you, because it's easy to, you look at this and you say, well, yeah, okay, that's fine. You just gave me a picture of a farm, basically. This is what all farms do. And it's easy to do it on a farm. So, how do we do this? How do we do this in real life in business? So I'd like to give you one more case study. Brendan, we're going till 2, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to skip the next task, and we can maybe just open the floor up for discussion earlier. Because I was going to ask you as a second task, imagine if you, then expanded the boundary beyond the Montfort School and started to look at this in terms of how do we connect other stakeholders in the community to this project so that their interests and the school's interests are both, achieved. That really, to me, is the creation of a circular economy. So I'll skip this bit because I wanted to, first of all, talk a little bit about that connection with Raworth's donut economics, because I mean this is basically what I think one of the things that you were learning about earlier, right? And so the whole idea behind this is that in a world of of limited resources, we've got these ecological ceilings, and if we go beyond the ecological ceilings, these problems start to happen. But on the other hand, there's a whole bunch of social needs that require money and economic activity. And if we don't have enough economic activity, we have a shortfall. So this is where we have poverty and food scarcity, water scarcity, energy scarcity. All of this kind of requires, economic systems to deliver. So we want economic systems, and we want to be able to deliver all of this, but we don't want them to go beyond this ecological ceiling. So we want, to achieve this kind of green space, right? And so that's basically the premise of donut economics. And so the solution to that is the circular economy, where we're saying, well, let's keep all of our virgin resources out of the system, and let's try to eliminate and reduce as many resources as possible. And by doing so, we can then create this system where we are in this safe and just space for humanity. But I guess really the question that I have, and this is the caveat to the circular economy, I love the work that I do, but I'm aware that, in many ways, what I'm simply trying to do is put a Band-Aid on a rather deep cut. Because in a world of 8 billion people, the question is, can we really achieve all of our sustainability goals? Can we really deliver all of these services to 8 billion people without going past this ecological ceiling? I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
It's a really big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I must admit, I spent years thinking about it too.
Yeah.
And I think that my response would be, it's not impossible. It's perhaps politically challenging, and also it requires people to have a different value system to the one that dominates at the moment. And those things take time to bring about. So for instance, it's not about trying to grow as big as possible with everything, or trying to make as much money as possible with everything, but actually really trying to stay within that safe and just space, and having people accept that we need to do it. We're just not used to it. We're actually kind of used to having half of part of the world being very wealthy and doing very well, and another part of the world suffering and struggling. And you need some redistribution to resolve that somehow. But that notion of redistribution is, a lot of people find it ideologically difficult to accept. It's almost as if you use a dirty word like communism, and that gets everybody really, really annoyed about it. But we're not talking about communism. We're just talking about a new kind of economy, and an economy that would work for everybody on the planet. Yeah, so we can tend to end up in a dead end when we come to really look at pathways forward. But I still think this is a very valuable way of looking at the problem. That's my reaction.
So what do we have? We've got about a dozen people today. So can I ask you all for a show of hands? I want to give you a choice, okay? You can have a choice. In 10 years' time, okay? In 10 years' time, you can either be making the equivalent of $20,000 US more than you are making now. Or you can be earning $5,000 less than you're making now. But you have the knowledge that if you're making $5,000 less, you are contributing to global sustainability. How many of you would choose the $5,000 less than now option?
Well, they
Show
don't,
hands.
they're students, so they don't have a salary as such,
Yeah.
but the question would be like if they were actually in a job earning a certain salary, yeah. I wonder,
So, well, okay, or we can couch it a little bit differently. We can say you have a choice. You can have a salary of 60,000 US a year, or you can have a salary of 20,000 US a year. So who would take the 20,000, knowing that you're contributing to sustainability?
anybody would take that. Has one hand gone up at the back? Who would take 20,000? Two hands went up. So 60,000 just as is, or 20,000, and you know that you're contributing to sustainability. Okay, more hands are going up. So we've got
Maybe establish whether or not we can actually live on 20,000.
can they live on the 20,000?
Sure, sure.
Are we talking just basically like the choice between 60K or the baseline required to not starve?
I think that here's
I mean, look, I mean, in Japan, there are people that live off of 20,000 a year.
yeah. So you're not starving on 20,000 a year. Your needs are met. But okay. Yeah, so I think there was six hands went up, some kind of slightly undecided, but yeah. Yeah, there's a few who are sort of kind of lifting their hand up a little bit, but not really sure. Okay, so you've got 6 takers.
So the thing is, I mean, you know, regardless of how you vote on this, the trouble is that you're never going to get 100 people, 100% of the people putting their hands up for you know the 20,000 offer, right? And so this is you know the tragedy of the commons, as they call it, because you know unless everybody else commits to a world of 20,000 as an income, we just simply are not going to be able to make our goals. You know, the current GDP, if you take an average globally, is $10,000. That's the current average GDP for the world, right? So if you assume that GDP is you know a proxy or a measure of wealth, so that means that the 10,000 is used for buying stuff, right? And so if you imagine that, you know, if it doubles, it will still be used for buying stuff. You know, you're not going to put it in the bank forever. And even if it goes into the bank, the people who borrow it from the bank will buy stuff. So the point is that it will buy stuff. And so if we have a planet that, you know, there are indications that we are about, you know, what's the global footprint network's number now, Brendan? Is it 1.3 something?
How many planets we're actually using? I think, yeah, it might be. I'm not sure actually. I've seen varied estimates, but it's at least 1.5, could be more than that. Yeah.
So, and that's at a global average GDP of 10,000. So if we double that, we are going to need, you know, as much as double the resources if we don't improve our efficiency. And so that's why, you know, the circular economy is so important, is that it will help to stave off, you know, the additional damage associated with trying to get everybody up to a level of, you know, where you would even be willing to entertain, you know, 20,000, right? So it's a really interesting and exasperating challenge. Okay.
Okay.
So let me just show you though how this applies to big business, because this is a really fun project. This is Itoshima in Kyushu. Really, truly one of my favorite places in all of Japan. I am just enthralled with Itoshima, and it's where the Kyushu University is. Now, I ran a project where I asked for some businesses to participate in a collaborative project. I said to them, look, how about if you come together, if you want to consider how we can work and collaborate more sustainably, but at the same time benefit each other. So that's the circular economy. I said, come on into these workshops. So we had 4 workshops, because we just had the 5th, so a little long. So at the end of the 4 workshops, we as a group had created this image. And so these companies were not chosen by me. They all volunteered. They're all in the area. So you had, you can see here an essential oil company, a couple of farms, so tomato farm, a turmeric farm, a cafe, a sake brewery that also had a bake shop and a cafe, a company that makes knitted goods, a mask making company, a person that owned a large bamboo plantation, and somebody who is running a chain of ramen shops, because after all, it's Kyushu ramen, right? So we asked them to think about the resources that they were using and how they could collaborate with each other to make things better. Okay, and this is what happened. It's a really interesting story. First of all, the turmeric farm, when you grow turmeric, you've got all the grass, right? You've got the leaves, but it also produces this beautiful white flower. Now, knowing that white flower exists, the essential oil company got excited, and they have actually started now an investigation into the medicinal properties of the turmeric flower. So now we've got a potential product here. Now, in response to this conversation, the mask maker got excited, and the mask maker said, well, essential oils, we make masks, and instead of having to breathe your bad breath all day, wouldn't it be nice if we could infuse this with some sort of fragrance? So now we've got a new product, competitive advantage, something that's more unique than the other masks that allow this company to charge a little bit more money, right? Now, as we started to talk further about the materials associated with farming, we started to talk about the leaves of the turmeric plant. You see, historically, with a turmeric plant, if you cut yourself, often people would wrap, the cut part with a heated up turmeric leaf. And the reason being is that it actually has an antioxidant property and so and also a disinfecting property to it. And so wouldn't that be great if we could take the leaves from the turmeric plant and we just turn them into mask making material? Because anything that's organic, you can turn into, a textile. Now, the sake factory, was listening and started to make a foray into collaboration by saying, well, we'll take some of your turmeric off your hands. Okay. Now, that's not a big deal, but, so now they've got turmeric from a local farm that they sprinkle on top of, curry rice. It's not a big deal, right? It's just a bunch of powdered turmeric, right? But the thing is, it's a competitive advantage because nobody else has local turmeric that they're putting on their curry rice. This makes this company's curry rice, the brewery's name is, sorry, I'll come back to that. It'll come to me in a sec. But the thing is, it just makes this curry rice something that's different, right? And that's what we're talking about here for businesses, is collaborating with each other for competitive advantage. So think about the cafe now. The cafe, of course, got excited because they thought, well, if you use the turmeric on the curry, why can't we make curry packs? So, they started to make these curry packs out of local farm spices. And all you have to do is tear the top open, dump in some water, and you can make your own curries for the evening. And then they thought, well, if we're doing that, we might as well also sell some knitted goods, and we can sell some stuff from the bakery. So, from the bakery of the Suginoya, which is the sake factory, they brought along they started to sell these bagels. These bagels, by the way, are cool. The bagels are made from sake no kazu. So the remnants of the rice from the bottom of sake vats. So then they take that and they mix it in with flour and yeast, and they create this bagel so that when you heat it and you break it up, it actually smells like sake. It has a small, slight after taste. It's just an amazing bagel. So, here's this company, this local cafe that's now starting to dip into all of the products that everybody else is selling to help them along, to help them to market their products, to help them market unique products, but at the same time to help their own business. Because now when you go to this cafe, you can buy spice packs, you can buy, these unique bagels, you can buy knitted goods, and you can buy these coffee mugs that are made from the bamboo plantation. So this all gives this company a competitive advantage and allows them to sustain their business practice in an interesting way. You can see here that the knitted good company is also exploring using the leaves from the turmeric factory for making, knitted goods as well. The tomato farm. Well, obviously, if you're making curry rice, you can take the tomatoes that you cannot sell and you can put them into the curry rice, right? One of the other interesting products that we came up with, because, being Canadian, we have in Canada, we have a drink. The drink is called a red eye. Does anyone know what a red eye is?
No, doesn't seem to be.
So a red eye is you take half a beer and half tomato juice and mix it together. And we call it a red eye because it's a hangover cure in Canada, but it's also incredibly refreshing. So if you're a beer drinker, try that sometime. It's an amazingly refreshing drink. But again, a new product, a new unique product by a collaborative effort through two organizations. The tomato farm also realized that, well, if you can make a mask out of the turmeric plant, you can certainly make a mask out of a tomato plant, right? Again, antioxidant properties present in a tomato plant. The link between the tomato farm and the ramen shop is interesting, because when you think about it, in Kyushu they have tonkotsu ramen, the pork bone ramen, and in many respects a lot of people don't like the pork bone ramen because it's really got a very strong flavor to it. And frankly, increasingly there are a lot of people that just simply don't want to eat meat anymore. So how about if we take some of these beautiful tomatoes and we mix them in with some local vegetables, some miso, and we can create a vegetarian option for the customers that are going to this shop. While we're at it, why don't we think about some of these other supplementary things we can, if you're going to offer gift boxes, how about if we can have a knitted bottle cover? How about if we can have some sake cups that go into the gift box? So imagine, again, competitive advantage. You've got two competing sake companies. One has, just normal cups. Another one has these very unique sake bamboo cups. Which one are you going to buy? Especially for a present when you're trying to communicate, a traditional gift for, something, like chugen in the summertime, for example. And then the other project that we identified was built off of the idea of the bagel. So now we're thinking about, the remnants of the sake vat. What else can we use them for? And so another product that we came up with was a mixture of miso and the sake rice, the fermented rice. And it really gives a distinct flavor. And imagine if you took that and then basted your meat in that and created a new ramen product. It would be a completely new competitive advantage. So, that's where we got to. I mean, all of these new products and services came out as a result of these conversations. And so, what we've created here is really a microcosm of what you could create if you had all businesses thinking about, how they could collaborate in a more sustainable way. And the most important thing about this, and I ask you all of this, think about it. What world would you like to live in? What community would you like to live in? This one with these, kind of average companies. Nobody's really doing anything different. They're all kind of the same. Or this one. This is a community. This is where people are actually collaborating together, getting to know each other. And as a result of that, they're creating innovations that make it really fun to live in this community. And just to highlight how fun that is and the power of this type of practice, I'm going to show you this final slide and watch how the slide unfolds, because these are pictures that were taken from the workshops. The first pictures are the first workshops, the last picture is the last workshop. But look at the demeanor and the faces and the way that people are interacting in these photos. So there's the first one. Look at the heads down, not talking. Very basic kind of standoffish discussions. And then that's the Suginoya's brewery. This is the last picture. So the last one was taken at the cafe, the organic cafe that we talked about. But look at the look on people's faces. Look how closely, look at their body language. Look how closely they're linked together. I mean, it was really unique for me because I stepped back and I thought to myself, here's a group of whatever it was, 12 people who came together as strangers. And now they're truly friends. They know each other. And as a result of that, we've created a far stronger community. And if we can continue to do that, I think we can realize the goals of, some of the sustainable outcomes that, some of Japan's sustainability strategies are aiming for. So that's kind of, I'll leave it at that, but I'm, happy for us to have a chat, hear your comments, hear any skepticism that you might have or criticism or concerns, because, that's how we learn and that's how we make systems better.
Thank you. I really love that example. And do you want to stop sharing? Yeah,
Yes.
I actually, I totally agree with you. And I feel, but I feel like the problem is that most of us here, and I'm maybe being a bit presumptuous, are sort of globally mobile. And kind of maybe our career trajectories are also going to be globally mobile. And we need, and it's very difficult to have the experience that you just described. And I've felt that myself in my professional career, which is why I'm working every year in Shimane Prefecture, in that little community where I see exactly what you're talking about happening. And it's not something that this is what I would suggest to the students, is find a little community somewhere. Even if you are going to be moving around the world with your career, find a little community that has those kinds of relationships where people are doing business together and finding opportunities, because that's, for me, that's one of the most rewarding projects that I've been involved in. And it feels very similar to what you've described. And I can give examples of like how they've renovated properties and turned them into cafes, and where when we organize an event and the food is provided by somebody who runs a vegetarian restaurant and so on. And I do see that model as being really, really attractive and very, very important. So personally, I totally, what you've said really resonates and connects with my own experience, but I don't know how the students feel about that. Do any of you have communities that you feel you're part of, intimately tied into? No, nobody's putting their hands up. I guess also it's a stage of life. As I got older, I started to really feel like I needed that kind of community root somewhere, but still the students are at that stage where they're moving forward through, you know, international exchange programs and global talent, if you like. And they haven't seen, maybe they haven't decided that it's time for them to set down roots somewhere. You know, that's my, oh, this is a hand up. Would you have to come? Ruben, could you come?
I can give it out.
Okay, can you hear?
I think one of the problems is that that's kind of died a lot. I know that in the UK a long time ago, there were a vast number of circular economies. Like it was quite a dominant practice. And then a lot of that died. And then now worldwide, like communities as well, like are struggling to be sustainable within themselves because there just aren't enough resources, cost of living and things go up, which means that any like fundamentally required external influxes become more expensive, and it becomes harder and harder because when the internal processes stay the same, for that to match up to the requirements for anything that is required from the outside, which is more and more the case as we become more digital, as we become more globalized, and so even if you are able to maintain what might have been before, then it's hard to like resist the urge to bring in new things because you're stuck then in the sort of old ages, and you don't, like, people want to have the amenities that come with the modern age, like, in a lot of ways. I mean, I had a class last semester where they talked about I forgot what they called it, but the movement of Japanese people from local communities towards the cities,
Right.
and the sort of metrocentrism where all of the infrastructure is geared towards the large populated areas and not the smaller communities on the outskirts. Except that in a lot of cases, those communities are incredibly important for the stuff that's happening in cities in terms of like environmental protections and maintenance of the natural space and all of that sort of thing. So it's kind of it's still currently a downhill trajectory.
Yeah.
So I think I also don't want to like make assumptions, but
No.
your generation, even there was more available, like community minded sort of communities were more present than they are nowadays.
Okay. Scott, you raised a, I mean, we're kind of running out of time, but I think the basic point is that it feels like it's disappearing. That kind, you know, the model that you just described there, that it is very difficult to maintain that model in the way the world works right now.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, because
We've gone over time, but if it's just quickly, maybe if you want to reflect on that.
quick second, okay. There can't be any argument to any of those comments. Those were really eloquently made. I would say that, first of all, my own personal perspective, we do not achieve sustainability as a planet without reducing our population numbers. There is just no way it happens. I've crunched the numbers every which way. It just does not happen. So that's point number one. Point number two is you're right that we've gotten away from this idea of circularity and using resources better, but it's going to come back. Last week, I'm on an ISO committee for the creation of a circular economy standard, and we have just released the first ISO standards in this area, ISO 59000. And what that means is it means that when companies companies start to embrace this, they will ask everybody in their supply chain to do the same thing. So, you know, we will put pressure on the markets to do so. While all this is happening, G7, the EU, ASEAN, China, have all committed to circular economy being the core of their future development strategies. So that means there's going to be a whole bunch of government investment that goes into this. So I think we'll be seeing, you know, we'll be seeing a change toward more efficiency, but it's not really to save the world. You know, the reason that we're doing this is because, you know, if you can make resources, make better use of resources, you can definitely have better, stronger economies. And so I'll leave you with just this thought. I mean, just to show you how inefficient our world is. So I don't know if you can see this at all. Can you see that? Sorry, it's because of my background. Can you see that?
No, now you've disappeared.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, yeah, some kind of plastic thing.
yeah. So the plastic that I was showing you, oh, there we go.
Yeah.
The plastic that I'm showing you, I got from Minamata in Kyushu. And Minamata is, of course, famous for the Minamata disease, but it's from the Minamata eco town. And you know what this is? This is rice plastic. So 70% rice, 30% binding agent. And the reason that they have created this product is because Japan has all of these stores of rice for security purposes that after 5 years they have to throw out. And so, you know, can you imagine 1 year's supply of rice is stored in some warehouse somewhere? What do you do with it? And just to highlight how inefficient our world has, for all of these years, we've just been throwing that rice away. And now, you know, Japan comes along and says, well, you know, let's have a company that takes this rice and turns it into, a plastic that we can make use of. Now, this is what Japan is doing, but what's Thailand doing? What's Malaysia doing? What's Indonesia doing? You know, so we've got a long way to go when it comes to trying to improve our efficiency of how we use resources.
Absolutely. And thank you for that example at the end. I think the students have to dash off to their next class, but
Thanks all.
maybe you can show appreciation for Scott's session. It was really excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
I really enjoyed it, and I really like the interactive session in the middle there. So thank you so much, Scott. And
Thanks all.
thanks to all the students online as well. Thank you.
Be in touch all.
I'll be in touch.
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks all.
Thank you.